Hi everyone and welcome back to another tutorial. In today's tutorial, I'll show you how to configure Rsyslog to log IP tables rules, right, with different log prefix to different files, right, on Ubuntu 20.04. So let's hop over to the Linux console. Okay, so as you can see, I've already logged on to my VPS in the cloud. So first, let's just do a quick check of the version of Ubuntu we're using. So we're using Ubuntu 20.04, the Focal .3 long-term support edition. Let's take a quick look at the IP tables we are using. Okay, we're using the version 1.8.4 version of IP tables. Okay, having the ability to log multiple logs based on the rule set in IP tables to different files is useful when you are looking at doing deep dive of the traffic, right, that is traversing your system, right, and you can do a lot of things with understanding of the logs, right. So let's start off by doing some basic configuration of IP tables. So let's add in the rule to allow or to accept traffic coming from the loopback interface. Okay, okay, let's look at a quick look at our IP table. Minus L to list, minus N for numeric, and V for verbose, followed by line numbers, right? So we can see that currently we have added the loopback interface. You can also take a look at the rules by issuing minus S, because if you are not in root, you need sudo. So default, we have 3 chain under the filter table, and we have just added the input, added the rules to allow loopback in the input chain under the filter table. Okay, and then next we're gonna allow connection that are pre-established or related to come in from the input table. And most importantly, if you are using SSH like me, want to make sure that we allow the SSH connection so that we don't lock ourselves out, right? So CT state. So if you're configuring the command from my website like I do, I've not fixed the encoding of the website. So do take note, minus minus, open close, double inverted commas, all this needs to be corrected. But this, you can follow and type the rule as we go along, right? And but if you're copying the rules, do take note of that, right? So we're gonna, for this rule, we are allowing TCP traffic that are matched coming in from POP 22. Any new and established, we're gonna accept it. Okay. I actually should break this out, but we'll look at that later. So now that we are done, okay, the last rule we're gonna put in before we go to the logging is to add in the rules, to change the policy for input, right? By default, the input chain accepts all traffic. We're gonna change it to drop, right? So So what happened is that we have created the accept rules for loopback. We are accepting all related and established traffic back from input. We are accepting SSH traffic, right, on port 22. Now, any other traffic we would want to drop, right? So this is a basic setup to protect your cloud VPS. There are a lot more rules that you can do in terms of blocking ICMP or allowing only certain source IP address from coming in to connect to SSH, right? There are tons of things you can do, but for this tutorial, it's not about IP table. It's really more for configuring Rsyslog. So we will just start with this couple of rules. Okay, so once we do that, if you have not installed IP table persistent, right, for the newer version, you need to install it manually. Please install it. I've already installed mine, so I'm going to issue the netfilter save command to save the configuration, right? So now if I look at IP tables, minus L minus V minus N minus line numbers, I should see that I have now created 1, 2, 3, 3 rules, right, in the input chain, and my default policy has changed from accept to drop. Okay, we'll not touch the forward and the output chain for now. So this is sufficient for us to start our configuration of the Rsyslog. Now, after this configuration, what we want to do is to create a few rules to start logging. So first, what I want is to log all the port 22 or SSH traffic coming in. So we're going to copy the rule. So let's do a -s so that we can just copy it, right? So this is the rule. The rule that we want to log. So let's paste it. So we're gonna add a rule, right, for the traffic that is coming in through port 22. Okay, if it's new, right, because we don't really want to log established traffic for now because it creates a lot of traffic. For -j, which is jump to, instead of jumping to the target accept, right, we're gonna jump to log, right? So this is the default capability of IP tables to log all to log the logs that we want in our system, right? And then we add in a log prefix followed by the name we want to identify the rule by. So we'll use IP tables underscore input underscore SSH underscore new, right? So just make sure that we have this tag set correctly. So we're gonna insert this rule. Actually, I'm going to insert this rule into rule number 2, right? Sorry, let's insert this to rule number 3 before the actual traffic happens, right? You can put it in front or behind, it doesn't really matter for the SSH part, but I always like to put the logs rules in front so that we capture the logs and then the actual accept, drop, return, reject, queue, etc. happens, right? So let's do that. And if I do a IP table -L -V -N line, we'll see that, oops, we have created the log rules, right, on line number 3 in front of line number 4, which is the actual rule. Okay, so that's one of the logs that we want to capture. Another logs that I would like to capture is actually the drop packet rule. So I'm going to do a sudo IP tables -append. So I'm going to add this to the end because remember IP tables, the rules are evaluated top down, right, from the first rules, and then it will look through the chain. So if I put the rules in front, it might capture the packets that is accepted, right? So for the input rules or for us to see the deny traffic, always add the input policy rules to log the input at the end of the rules itself. Now, of course, you can create another chain, create another rule to do just logging of denied packet, but this is a quick way to get done. Okay, so minus a input, minus j log, right? So we're gonna log all the inputs coming in, right, after they have been processed. And then same thing, I'm gonna give it a prefix, log prefix IP tables underscore I underscore deny, right? So let's do that. Okay, so we can do a net filter, save again, just to be sure. Okay, I need to do sudo, my apologies. Okay, we are safe. Then we do a IP table list again. Okay, we can see that the two logs rules are already defined in the IP tables itself. Now we can issue a IP table restart, but we shouldn't have to do that, right? But so now let's look at tailf. Okay. Let's check out the log folder. Tables. So let's just do a quick restart of my syslog server. Okay, and let's check out my syslog. Okay, so the logs are not coming into my syslog yet. Okay, so this is a little bit of restart, but you can see that the IP tables minus I denied rule has kicked in, right? There was traffic. There wasn't any traffic just now, so, but now that we are seeing traffic coming in, by default, the logs are logs into /var/logs/syslog, or it also should be logged into the kernel.log file, right? So however, I think I have accidentally deleted the kernel.log, and then I have not restarted the kernel log properly, so we're not seeing that in kernel log, but we are seeing it in syslog. Okay, so by default, right, all the IP tables logs, right, are sent to kernel.log or syslog, right? So it can become quite busy, right? And sometimes confusing when we start logging more logs into the standard kernel log file, right? And so in labs or in testing or in trying out IP tables, we might want to separate the IP table logs from the rest of the system logs or kernel logs so that we can do more in-depth segregations or analysis. Now, the way to do is to use the rsyslog function, right? that is already default available in the Ubuntu 20.04, especially if you're using VPS. Now you can use ulog2. There are other logging tools out there that you can work with, right? But out of the systems, Rsyslog is there. So for lab environment, I like to just leverage on that. So first thing you need to do is let's go over to the /etc/rsyslog folder. So that is where the logs are being configured, right? So default in a VPS in DigitalOcean, you have the default rules, you have the UFW rules if you have not deleted UFW, and then there is a cloud init rule. Now the key thing to take note over here is that the number, right, that you use to create the file has to be lower than the default rules, right? So very similar to how iptables look through is rules, right? In order of top to bottom, right? The smaller numbers supersede the bigger number. Same thing, right? For Rsyslog, when it looks at the configuration in the Rsyslog D folder, it will pick up the config of the lower numeric number first, and then it will go through the higher numeric number. Now, why is this important? Now, if I did not configure or create the config file for iptables after 50, right? I might, for example, if I create a config file with 51, right? That means that we will never actually hit the config in 51 because config file 50 has already specified all the default logging, right? So we won't miss the config after the default file. So one good way to do it is to do or create a file starting with a lower number. So I've put 10 so that it supersedes UFW, it supersedes the cloud init. We can actually create the rule after cloud init and delete off the UFW config as well. Right, but to make things simple, we're going to create the iptables config file with the lowest number in that folder itself. Right, so once we are in there, what we're going to do is we're going to start configuring the parameter for Rsyslog. Right, so I already configured that in a text file, so I'm going to try and copy and paste it over. Okay, so I'm going to copy over the file, the configuration, and then explain to you what the configuration means. Okay, so this is to log the message, right? So what it will happen is it will look through the kernel message, and if the kernel message contains, right, this IP table I underscore deny, so do remember it's case sensitive, then I want to have a new action, which is to send this message to a type, right? Output file type and the actual file name of the log file, right? So if the message contain iptables underscore capital I underscore deny, then I'm going to log the message into a new file called iptable underscore input underscore deny. Okay, and then else if, right, if the message contain iptable underscore I underscore ssh underscore new, then I'm going to send it to a new file, right, called iptable ssh input new.log. Okay, and then the ampersand stop here, what it means or what it does is that it will stop logging the logs to kernel or syslog, right? So that I don't have duplicate logs. So for lab testing, this is useful so that my log size doesn't, grow out of control, especially if I leave it overnight, right? And not to have duplicate logs for testing purposes. Now for production, you might or might not do that because like in some of the environment whereby you are logging every of your logs into a SIEM, which is usually costly because the amount of logs that you're going to put into SIEM, and if they charge you by storage space, it can be very expensive. But if you are doing that, right, you want to keep all the logs in the syslog or kernel file where you usually copy the logs into a SIEM or a log collector for archiving or for analysis. So for testing, I would want to reduce the number of logs in my system. So I'm going to stop the duplicate of the logs to kernel and syslog by using a &stop. Okay, once that's done, let's exit and save the file. Oops, I believe might not have. Let's copy this. Okay, I might not have done the sudo. Let's paste it in again. Just make sure that iptables_I denied. So just make sure that the prefix is correct. Okay, let's exit, save this. Okay, let me just validate the syntax again, just to be sure. iptables capital I_deny iptable capital I SSH new. Okay, so it looks correct. So let's do a rsyslog. No. So let's restart the syslog server. Okay, now let me just open up another Windows. Let's just do a quick validation var/logs/syslog. Okay, we can see that the logs are still going into our kernel iptable_s_I. Okay, let's just break this for the time being. Let's just check. Okay, I should be seeing IP tables. Let's just. Okay, we are seeing that IP tables the input deny is happening. Okay, that's good. Let's just try and let's just grab -I IP tables. Okay, so it seems that it is capturing. Oh, I'm on the wrong machine. Sorry. So let's co. Okay. So as you can see, I am actually using Jumbo. So this is a different machine. So let's just SSH. Okay, so I don't have it here. /root/.id. Sudo. Okay. Okay. Yes. SSH-I ID test root at 1.6. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with SSH key-based login, you can check out my other tutorials. So even for my Cloud Lab, I try to use the key-based authentication to make it slightly more secure and with a passphrase. Okay, so now we're back into the right machine, right? So if I do a curl if config.me, okay, now we are on the same machine. Okay, let's do a tail sudo tail -f. Okay, now that I'm in root, this should be easier. Syslog. Okay, we should see that the logs have stopped. Okay, let's just check out the folder. Apologies, so we can see that okay, my kernel is still not really logging, but my IP table input deny and IP table input SSH new is kicking in, right? So if I do a tail -f/var/log/IP tables SSH new, right? I can see the logs that are being logged into the new file, right? You can see the connection from source IP to destination IP, and it is being logged. Okay, so this is all the new and established the new traffic coming in. So in this traffic, there are packets that are allowed and there are packets that are not allowed, right? So we did not specify deny SSH. We actually specify all new SSH connection. So you can see that there are multiple source IP address, right? So you can see I have source IP address coming from 92, I have source IP coming from 35, I have source IP coming from 139, I have source IP coming in from 46. So there were 4 new requests coming in, right? And I'll show you. If I go over to the base config and do a tail f logs, right? Okay, let's make it easier and just pipe grep -i invalid. Okay, you can see that there are invalid user. Now if I hop over to the logs, okay, and we do a manual matching, we can see that the last source 143.244.151.160 is actually using a user account Gyeonbin, right? And using a standard username. That's why we see a pre-auth here. If you're using key, you'll see a different kind of message, and we realize that somebody's probably trying to do a brute force, right? So, but these are all the new connection that are trying to come in. Now I can write a script to correlate the logs from my IP table input new and the brute force or the potential brute force by failed authentication, and do some form of mapping if I need to, right? I mean, the SSH part is pretty straightforward because we actually don't need the IP tables logs because we are already seeing the similar logs in the auth.log, right? But for other application, right, this might be useful for you to do correlation. Okay, so that's pretty much the config that we need to do for the Rsyslog. Right now, that's the last step that you might or might not do depending on whether you are going to leave the logging of different logs to different file permanent, right? So you might just be turning on Rsyslog logging of the IP tables rule to different files for just a short testing, right? And you want to remove it. Now, if you're not and you're keeping it overnight like me in some of my config, then you need to make sure that you edit the log rotation config, right? So that the logs gets rotated daily and weekly. And that way your system won't get choke or your hard disk won't run out of space, right, from logs itself. It's very unlikely, however, you never know, right? So do take note, if you are going to keep separate logs file for IP tables, do remember to add them into your log rotation policy. So the log rotation policies is stored inside /etc rotate d, right? And then for rsyslog, it's inside the rsyslog file. So all we need to do is just come here, right? I usually like to put it after my auth /var/log and specify the files. .log /var/log/iptables /_ input _ssh _new .log. Let's just do a quick check to make sure I have the file name correctly. ll/var/logs, and let's look at pipe grep minus IP tables. Okay, so I have IP tables _deny _input _deny, that's correct, _ssh input new. Okay, input new. Okay, so once you specify, just save. What happens is that you have added the config to the log rotation of the system logs like the rest, right? So it reduces the risk of your hard disk filling up by all the logs that are available. So that's pretty much there is for this tutorial. So let's just quickly go through what we have done. For step 1, we have created the IP table. So let's just look at my IP tables. -v, -n, minus line numbers. Okay, so first step, we have done the config to add the SSH new connection log as well as the input deny logs into my IP table for logging, right? Step 2, we have added a new file, right, and configure the rules to log or to capture the message with the necessary header and set it to 2 new files, right? And last but not least, we have added the files that we have specified over here into our log rotation policy, right? So log rotate syslog. Okay, so we have added in the IP tables deny and IP table SSH input new into the log rotation policy. So that's all there is for this short tutorial. Thank you very much for watching. Hope this video has been useful. Do stay safe and take care. Thank you. Goodbye.